can go grab it online and get it shipped directly to your house. So try our friends at Socorro Tequila today. The link to their shop is in our bio. And now we are really excited to welcome in David Cunningham to the show. David, thanks so much for the time this morning, and welcome back.
Thanks for having me, man.
When you have gone through your last couple of months covering Virginia Tech and the James Franklin era, now pushing 3 months, what has this run been like for the Hokies?
It's been kind of crazy. Virginia Tech's never really had a recruiter as a head coach. Frank Beamer was okay in his time once he got the program up and rolling, but James Franklin is a recruiter at his heart. That's what he does best. And so it's been a little bit of a change. You saw him come in late November and turn what Virginia Tech had as a sub 100 class into a top 25 signing day class. And then, well, you go out in the transfer portal and you add a quarterback like Ethan Grunkemeyer from Penn State, and you add some different pieces here and there across the board, really revamp your entire roster. It's been a lot. They've also added, all these coaches, new coaching staff, but I think they're in a pretty good place. And James Franklin's kind of hit the ground running. He's only been there in place for about 90 days. And I think you're starting to really see his impact across the board.
And when you see what James Franklin's done in the transfer portal, how much did you have to change your expectations for year one of this program under him, or what do you think now that we've seen the results get on the table here?
I think this can be a really good team. I'm still interested, Billy, to see what happens in spring football once we get a really good feel for this team. Because I think on paper they've got a lot of good pieces, but it's also one of these things where they just went 3-9. We've seen big turnarounds. You don't have to ask Kurt Cignetti about that. Turnarounds are possible really quickly in this era. What I'm curious to see is how everything meshes together. I think they've got a good quarterback. They've got a good running back room. Is the offensive line revamped enough? That's one of the big questions. Defensive line. I think they've got enough defensive line pieces. But I look at linebacker and I go, there are a lot of questions there that need to be answered still. They've got a lot of bodies at defensive back between corner and safety. But who's going to play where? There are a lot of questions still. But I think this roster has been overhauled and it's improved. How improved? Are we talking 8 wins? Are we talking 10 wins? I'm not really sure. I think it's probably around 8 or 9. That'd be my guess. And they also have a really tough schedule. You have to look at that too. They got to go to SMU. They got to go to Clemson. They got to go to Miami. And that's all basically in the second half of the season. They got Virginia at home too. So it'll be interesting to see how this thing shakes out. But Virginia Tech is in much better hands, of course. And it's interesting to say that, given that Brent Pry, the former head coach, is James Franklin's defensive coordinator. But that's how this situation is going to work now, and it's going to be very interesting.
As Ethan Grunkemeyer takes over at quarterback, in all likelihood, I would assume. I mean, I know there's other quarterbacks on the roster, but it sure seems like he would be that guy. What are the expectations from an identity perspective on offense, or is that something that we're all going to have to kind of wait and see? Do you think we see a shift from how they played at Penn State and just kind of grinding it out versus seeing what we see in the ACC, a little bit more of wide open offenses for the most part?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because James Franklin talked about that a little bit once or twice. I think it might have been in his introductory press conference about how they want to spread it out a little bit more, which might come as a surprise to some Penn State fans, because it's like, what the heck? We did not do that at all at Penn State. But I think they kind of want to shift the identity a little bit. And Ty Howell is the new offensive coordinator. He was James Franklin's tight ends coach for the last handful of years. And we spoke with them within the last 2 weeks about how they see eye to eye, Franklin and Howell, about what they want to do. And they've got a quarterback in Ethan Grunkemeyer that is not that mobile. Not that he's not athletic, but he's not really a running quarterback. That's a shift from what Virginia Tech wanted to do in the past, where you had Kyron Drones, who was a run-first guy. You've got a quarterback in Ethan Grunkemeyer that uh, his completion percentage for the season last year, if he were to have those same numbers at Virginia Tech, it would be a single season completion record for the Hokies. So you're talking about a guy who is very, very accurate, very, very efficient. And he just finished his redshirt freshman year. He's got multiple years to build and continue to get better. And they brought over Danny O'Brien, the quarterbacks coach from Penn State, who obviously has a lot of familiarity with Grunkemeyer. So I think you'll see them spread it out more and air it out a little bit more. But Billy, that goes back to the offensive line for me. I think you've got a really good quarterback, yes, but you have to be able to protect him. And Matt Moore is the Virginia Tech offensive line coach. It's his second straight year. James Franklin kept him around. That position was one that Brent Pry never really got right in his tenure. And I'm curious to see if they can kind of get the offensive line figured out. Because if so, if they can protect Ethan Grunkemeyer, they've got receivers, they've got running backs, they've got tight ends. They revamped that room as well. I think they can be a pretty good team, but it all starts up front, and that was a weak spot for the Hokies for the last couple of years.
When you found out the news that Brent Pry was going to be the defensive coordinator, where were you? What was your reaction? Did you hear it coming?
A little bit. It's funny. We talked to James Franklin around his introductory press conference and asked him, would there be a possibility Brent Pry would be back? And he kind of shied away from it. I think he was so in the moment of his own, hiring and whatnot. But when we got the news, it was kind of mid-December that it's, hey, this is kind of going to happen or has a real chance of happening a couple weeks after Franklin was hired. And I go back to what James Franklin said about Brent Pry at his introductory press conference, where he started tearing up when he was asked about him. Their relationship, Billy, is very unique, Brent Pry and James Franklin. Franklin played quarterback for Brent Pry's dad at East Stroudsburg University up in Pennsylvania about 30 years ago. And Brent and James formed this unique bond, and they coached together at Vanderbilt, Penn State, now Virginia Tech. And one of the things that Franklin mentioned last week was that Brent Pry was a guy I was considering to be my defensive coordinator no matter where I went. For example, I'm throwing this out there. Had James Franklin taken a, say, Arkansas job, well, Brent Pry would have been one of his top choices to go be the defensive coordinator. So why not? Why wouldn't it work at Virginia Tech? It's only weird because he's the former head coach. But I think James Franklin talking to the fans about how much Brent Pry meant to him throughout this process of telling it out like it is. Hey, here's the job you're walking into. Here's the positives. Here's the negatives. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. And also, I think it says a lot about Brent Pry that he's able to kind of weather that. And he's a guy who truly loves Virginia Tech, but to be fired and then to come back. And Billy, I have never seen a coach get a fired coach who only won 3 games, had a really bad season, come back and get a standing ovation from the fans.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the Virginia Tech fans look at this and go, he was a great guy, but he wasn't a good coach. But they also look at him as part of the reason James Franklin's in Blacksburg. So it's a very just unique situation and really cool that he's back. And he feels refreshed, Billy, because guess what? He's no longer Brent Pry, the head coach. He's Brent Pry, the scheme up blitzes defensive coordinator. He's a guy who can focus on positional meetings and get his hands in the dirt and focus on blitz packages and whatnot. So I think he's really excited. He feels kind of a breath of fresh air because he doesn't have all that weight on his shoulders anymore.
It's going to be fascinating to watch that. That's where I don't have as many worries about Virginia Tech. And I'm glad, and for if you didn't listen to the show earlier, we were talking about some of the quarterbacks and we were talking about the early rankings that came out where CBS Sports has Virginia Tech at 5 in the ACC. Now that's relative to a league that's not crazy, but you see some of the things that a lot of other people maybe don't see. You see it, what we all see, which is Ethan Grunkemeyer and James Franklin, big name, Brent Pry's defense back, kind of some of those things. But it's still a heavy lift. But if there's one area that I kind of have confidence in, it's that they do have their defense kind of back in a sense, and I think there's a lot to kind of hang your hat on in that regard, that there's not going to be that overhaul in that respect. So what it is for Virginia Tech, I feel like a lot of it's offensive personnel and trying to kind of get that fire lit for James Franklin, and that's what spring's going to be. But when you look at that roster building, and you kind of sit back and maybe give it a overall grade for us, just to kind of give us some good expectations, I think, going into spring and then the fall. What would you kind of grade out everything from the roster building piece?
I would probably give it a B. I think it could be a little bit better. And the tough part is, Billy, there's still some unproven guys. Like, there are guys who were really, really highly touted high school guys that they brought in. I look at the defensive line. I go, Javion Hilson from Missouri. He was a former 5-star high school recruit. They brought him in, and they are very excited about him. They brought in a couple different guys at linebacker, cornerback. I mean, 30-plus transfers, and there are going to be guys all over the place. There are just some guys in spots that are unproven, and I think that's the tough part. But I think it is a solid. I would give it a solid like B roster construction. And I think when you compare it to what the Hokies had, given they went 3-9, man, that's night and day. And I think they're going to be in a much better spot. And I like the way it is constructed. I'm curious to get kind of see how it shakes out, what the depth chart looks like, who rises to the top, because I think they've got a lot of talent in a lot of places. I'm interested. I don't know as much about the depth. I think they feel confident about some of those guys in the two deep. James Franklin, of course, says they feel confident about all of them. But I think I look at like linebacker and I go, okay, who's going to kind of rise to the top? There are a lot of guys who are unproven, a lot of highly touted recruited guys. But at some point, you got to go play and you got to go make plays. So I think it's solid. They didn't get a ton of guys defensively with a lot of snaps and a lot of experience. One of the guys they did is Jaquez White. He was an all Sun Belt player at corner at Troy. I think he's a guy that immediately steps into that kind of role and is a starter for you alongside a guy like Isaiah Brown Murray, who is back. So I think they did probably a B job in terms of roster construction, Billy, and I think they did a good job of meshing their old roster and the guys they wanted to keep with the guys they wanted to bring in.
The last one for me on Virginia Tech football, and I do want to talk briefly about the win over Clemson last night. You look at the schedule for Virginia Tech, and we could be going into October with an undefeated Virginia Tech Hokies team, just with the way it lays out. If all things go, as planned, they have an opportunity here to make some noise in year one. How important is that kind of fast start, capitalize on it, and then let the chips fall where they may the rest of this schedule? Because it's still a schedule that has Pitt, Cal, Georgia Tech, Clemson, SMU, Miami, and then Virginia on it. So it's not an easy slate, but you can at least ease into this schedule, at least like it looks like to me.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in the non-conference, VMI Old Dominion, and then at a road game at Maryland, I think that'll be a unique game, given James Franklin was a long-time assistant there under Ralph Friesian. Last time the Hokies played there, he was on Maryland staff. And then you got Boston College. That's about as, I think, friendly as an ACC opener as you could have. That I look at those first 4 ACC games, BC, Pitt, Cal, Georgia Tech, and I go, man, I think they've got a pretty good draw there to start. And I think what the hope is that the Hokies figure out who they are in those first 6 to 8 games of the season and find a groove where they build up some momentum, where they get off to a good start. Say they start 4-0. And that game against Narduzzi and Pitt on a Friday night will be very interesting given Franklin's former Pennsylvania ties. But I think the schedule on the front end, Billy, shakes out very nicely. The back end is a little more difficult. I mean, they go at Clemson, at SMU, at Miami and Virginia with a home game against Stanford squeezed in between. Those are your final 5 games. That is not easy. But you've got to take care of business, I think, on the front end. And I think they've got a good opportunity to. I think they will take advantage of it. And if so, I think that kind of gets you off on a good start and kind of gives you an opportunity to maybe overachieve a little bit. Say you start 5-0 and you're 2-0 in the ACC to start. Well, you go to Cal and you've got a lot of momentum. You're playing really good football. If you can build up as many wins as you can before that really, really critical stretch late, I think that gives you a good opportunity to overachieve.
Let's go back to Wednesday night and Virginia Tech getting it done against Clemson. A huge win for the NCAA tournament hopes and dreams of the Hokies. They win 76-66, improved to 17-8. They're back to 500 now in ACC play. Your takeaways from that game and what that means for the Hokies as a whole.
Yeah, I was there in Clemson last night, and I thought that was Virginia Tech's most complete performance of the season, at least since New Year's Eve against Virginia in that triple overtime game, but maybe all season. Billy, we have not seen Virginia Tech shoot the ball great lately. In the last 4 games, they had shot below 43%. And the Hokies went 52% from the floor and 52% from 3. They were on offensively. And Mike Young talked about how they tweaked some different things over the last 2 days of practice coming into it. And they, against a really good Clemson defense that's top 15 in adjusted efficiency, they did not want the ball to stick. They wanted the ball to keep moving. And I thought they did a good job with that. But then I look at the defensive side of the ball. Clemson's an interesting team, as you know, that uses so much depth. Brad Brownell plays about 10 guys, and they get a lot of bench production. I think they got about 35 points from the bench yesterday. But it was really just 3 guys. Tech shut down R.J. Godfrey and Justin Porter. Outside of the 3 guys who scored the ball really well, the rest of the team was like 5 for 25. Hokies did a really good job of playing defense on everybody. Guys, of course, are going to get their buckets, and somebody has to score. But I thought Virginia Tech's defense down the stretch, particularly in those final few minutes, was huge. They were really good in the second half on that end of the floor, and they were able to close out a game. It wasn't too long ago that I was in Dallas and Virginia Tech lost to Boopy Miller on that half-court buzzer beater, right? But you turn the page time and time again, and I think Virginia Tech has showed, hey, we can close out games now. They've gotten the hang of that, and you saw that against Clemson. Tigers ended the game 2 for 11 from the floor. So I like the way they finished it. They needed this one for the resume, Billy, and they got it. And now the trick is they've got 5 or 6 games left, and you've got to close it out. You can't afford to slip up, especially like when you go home this weekend and you got a Florida State team that's playing pretty good basketball as of late. So I like the way they played. What'll be interesting to see is if they can continue it.
David Cunningham, we appreciate the time, my friend, and thanks so much for stopping by. We'll have to do it again. Great insights.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me.